YouTube, what the crap's going on? Heir of Carthage here, back on Total War Rome 2. Need to adjust my microphone just a little. There we go. So yeah, I'm gonna do another faction focus today, and the faction focus today will be the Boii. The Boii are a power faction in Rome 2 right now, and that probably comes as a surprise to anybody who hasn't kept up with this game since patch 15 or 16. So if you've been living in that Total War cave, so to speak, and haven't played Rome 2 since 15 and 16, then you are in for a surprise whenever you come up against the Arverni, the Boii, or Tylus. Tylus is another one that would surprise many people, but today we're going to talk about the Boii. The Boii have many strengths in this patch, and it's interesting to kind of talk through all these. So let's start with the generals units and what you have available. The Boii have access to Noble Horse. They also have access to Oathsworn as their general. Noble Horse is definitely a strong cavalry unit. They definitely have a lot of melee attack, good weapon damage for a cav unit. Very nice charge bonus. I mean, if the charge got a whole lot higher, they would practically be shock cavalry. They have very good melee defense for cavalry speaking. The armor is probably not as big as some other cavalry units that have really high armor, especially like Cataphracts or maybe Ozet Knights or other stuff like that. But very good health and base morale. Now these units do field the expert charge defense. Now expert charge defense is something that I'm not sure that we entirely understand on cavalry. Maximus did a lot of tests that showed that it didn't seem to work unless they were dismounted. Some people dispute that, that's fine. I don't really know what expert charge defense does for them at this point, because it seems like expert charge defense tends to work best when your unit's sitting still. I don't know if it works when you countercharge. Again, it's a strong cavalry unit, and used properly it can do a lot of damage, but I think it's going to depend on who your opponent is as to whether or not you would go with the Noble Horse. Almost exclusively with the Boii, your pick for general should be the Oathsworn with this strategist. And the reason is it gives you second wind and battle rhythm. Second wind makes your unit regain all of its stamina. So you can be completely exhausted, use second wind on that unit, and it will be completely fresh. And that goes hand in hand, second wind and battle rhythm. Battle rhythm actually gives you increased attack for a short amount of time, but also gives you a fatigue penalty. And when a unit is fully fatigued, they take massive detriment to their melee attack and their defense, I believe, and also their speed. Maybe not defense, but I know at least their attack. I want to say defense is involved in that. So Headhunt is a special ability that the Oathsworn have, and when you combine that with Strategist, basically you can use Headhunt without any detriment. You can charge into combat, you can pop Battle Rhythm, you can use Headhunt whenever you're ready, and then you can just hit Second Wind, and the bad effects of all of that have been undone. So you get all the good effects without any of the bad effects. That's why the Strategist General with the Oathsworn is so common, and it's a choice that I recommend to you if you're going to be using the Boii. Now as far as melee infantry, herein lies the power of the Boii. They have access to Celtic warriors, which are some of the best meat shields in the game. These units have very nice charge, decent melee attack, great weapon damage for a cheap unit. And then they're going to have decent melee defense. Now their armor is definitely lacking because they're a cheap unit, and that's understood, and their morale is lacking. But good health for such a cheap unit as well at 55. So these guys are going to be really good spread out thin. They have javelins that can be thrown at cavalry or other infantry. They can interrupt the charges of more expensive units. They are very useful. I think in a head-to-head fight, these guys can even beat Hastati if they get a good charge. So this is a very handy unit. Do not confuse these guys with Gallic warriors. The two are a little different. Gallic warriors are also good, but Celtic warriors are better. They have access to as many axemen as they want. These are not mercenary axemen. You can bring as many axemen as you like. And axemen are an interesting unit. They're relatively cheap, and if used properly, they get a nice return for their price. So, or I shouldn't say axemen, axe warriors. Axemen are a different unit that can be fielded by Armenia and maybe a few others. So, axe warriors. Their melee attack's not all that good, so it's not bad, but it's not real high like a sword unit. Their weapon damage is not real big, but the key here is that a good deal of it is armor piercing. So each time they do score a hit, they're going to score 10 armor piercing damage, which is very nice. Decent charge bonus, good melee defense, nice armor, decent health, decent morale. So that's what's going to make these guys a solid pick for their price. Now where do they excel? You wouldn't want to use them against sword units per se, because the sword units tend to do better in that type of combat. Where you'd want to use these guys is against high armor, high value targets after they've been shielded by a meat shield. There's other factions that have access to axe warriors as mercenaries, say like Massilia. And Massilia can use axe warriors in an interesting manner because they can kind of take the charge with their expert charge defense hoplites, and then axe warriors can float through their ranks to get involved so that they don't get charged, and they can come in and then grind out longer. And that's where axe warriors are going to shine. They're going to shine in a battle, and they will do best against a unit like hoplites, I think. And the reason I say that is because the hoplites don't have a high attack, and they do have high armor. So they aren't going to kill the axe warriors very quickly, but the axe warriors are going to be hacking through the armor of those other units quite nicely. Now that does not mean that axe warriors are going to beat all hoplite units. It just means that these guys are best used against high armor units when they have not been charged. So, next, naked warriors. These guys are kind of a glass cannon. Very expensive, really, but also potentially extremely damaging. Naked warriors have the frenzy ability, which used to be kind of pointless, but now is actually quite damaging. It does fatigue your men, but the charge damage increase is substantial. And if you use frenzy and get a proper charge with these guys against high value targets, it can be devastating. They are extremely low armor though, and one other thing needs to be understood actually. So this bonus versus infantry should be applied to both their attack and damage whenever they're fighting against infantry. So it gives them a very high attack at 49. 49 versus infantry, and it'd be 40 damage. So these guys do a lot of damage to infantry, and I believe these bonuses, whether it's bonus versus cav or bonus versus infantry, gets applied pretty much straight to that unit, almost as if it was armor piercing. So this is a huge deal. These guys are very strong in that respect, but if you come down here and look, their armor is extremely low. And this is another key thing to understand, this little circle, light melee infantry. That means cavalry are going to absolutely wreck these guys. Cavalry of any sort, even the lightest cavalry, is going to cause these guys a lot of trouble. So that's why I say they're kind of a glass cannon. They can cause extreme amounts of damage, especially if they get a rear charge. Yep, there comes the jokes about being rear charged by naked warriors. Always comes, but that's okay. It's just begging to be joked about. But in any case, keep these guys clear of missiles, keep them clear of cavalry, and they will do a great job. So they would have to be protected properly. Now, herein lies the main strength of the Boii. It's the sword followers. This is one of the best mid-tier sword units in the game. These guys are very good. Solid melee attack, not as good as like Roman infantry, but very good weapon damage. And they have a 27 charge bonus, which is very nice for a mid-tier sword. Solid melee defense, good armor, really nice health for a mid-tier sword unit, and very good morale for a mid-tier sword unit, all along with shield wall. That's what makes the Boii so dangerous. They can bring a lot of these guys, combine them with Oathsworn, and you have a very difficult to knock out formation. These guys can brace against charges fairly well, they have javelins, they can duke it out in kind of a grind out fight, and they have a nice charge. They pretty much bring the whole package. So that's why you have to be fearing of the Boii, the sword follower. Very good unit. Oathsworn we kind of discussed up here, but again, Oathsworn are a powerful sword unit. They are punishing. They have a huge charge bonus, very nice melee attack, and very good weapon damage. These guys are brutal when they get into a fight. Their AP damage isn't real high, but these guys are going to deliver some hurt. Very good melee defense, nice armor, very good health, good morale. And then they have Headhunt to go along with Shield Wall. So these guys are a unit to be feared indeed. Very expensive, but these guys can crush Roman infantry if they get a good charge. And they can be a real danger to any formation attack sword unit. So definitely something to keep in mind. Now, I really like how Maximus has taken to calling these guys MLG Freeman. And a lot of other tournament players that I see really believe in Levy Freeman. And that's great. They have a really important purpose in the game. And some of you might, why does he call him MLG Freeman? MLG, of course, is Major League Gaming. He calls them that because they have so many uses, I think. And they can be used to great effect in a battle, even though they're a horribly cheap unit with terrible stats. These guys are very confusing. If you just look at the stats and be like, Heir, are you serious? You're telling us that these guys are MLG? No. It's not their stats that are going to blow you away. It's how they can be used. They have a decent missile block chance. They're extremely cheap. They have javelins, and that's the real kicker. Any cheap unit with javelins in patch 15 and 16 is going to be worth its weight, especially when it's cheap. And the reason is because javelins can be extremely devastating when thrown into the rear of units, thrown into skirmishers, thrown into cavalry. you just don't want javelins coming from a 200 talent unit, say, into like a royal cataphract, because all that damage is horrible for your cataphract to absorb from such a cheap, worthless unit. And then, to boot, on top of all that, if these guys come into a cavalry fight after your cavalry's already been engaged, so charging them, you can definitely wreck them. Again, you don't want to eat those javelins, but if they come into a cavalry fight after it's already been started, you have to apply this 25 bonus versus large, which means that effectively they get a 37 attack and a 47 weapon damage versus cav. That's pretty painful. And it's one of those things that you just have to, really be careful of. So Levy Freemen really are a dangerous unit. Now, Spear Warriors are an interesting unit as well. If you're going to come up against a cav-heavy faction, the Boii have some interesting tools as well. Not only do they have very sturdy sword infantry, they have these decent sturdy spear infantry too. Now, Spear Warriors pack a pretty nice punch, and they come with cavalry counter tactics, which is very good whenever you're trying to bring down cataphracts. So a very useful unit, and not real expensive for the fact that you get cavalry counter tactics. Veteran Spears are going to be a little bit better still. These guys are going to come with very solid morale, and they also have shield wall. So again, these guys are going to be able to hold out for a while. Very nice melee defense, and by the time you pop shield wall, they're going to be good. Now, their attack and damage isn't all that good. They do have a 15 bonus versus large and cavalry counterattacks, so clearly they're going to be dangerous to enemy cavalry. You're not going to see these guys near as often, because Levy Freemen and Spear Warriors can help fill the gap, but definitely still a good unit. So this is the one weakness, really, of the Boii. And call it a weakness. It's not an entire absolute weakness, but it's a weakness, and that's their skirmishing. They do have access to long-range skirmishers of both varieties, both sling and bow, and both are quite cheap, which is nice. The downside is that they are the low damage. I say the downside, it's good. I mean, if the Boii had any more tools, we would all be screwed. We don't want these guys to have any better skirmishers. So Celtic Slingers, very low damage, not very good morale. But again, they can provide some long-range firepower where needed. Celtic Bowmen do not have the 150 range, and of course they will die very easily even to the cheapest of slingers and most other archers, but they become a very important tool against elephants that could potentially be used against the Boii. They also have access to Celtic skirmishers, which are not bad skirmishers. They're not going to be particularly great at wiping out infantry, though they can definitely damage them. They're going to be a huge threat to elephants, and they have a decent missile block chance with their shield, I think. So definitely a useful unit. So another thing that's going to make the Boii really strong is their selection of cavalry. They have light horse and noble horse, which we already discussed. The big thing is this heavy horse. Heavy horse is an excellent mid-tier cavalry. The price is just fantastic for what you get here. It's a heavy cav, so they're good at knocking down even heavier infantry on the charge. They have good weapon damage, very nice melee attack. They have a nice bonus versus large. They have a good charge bonus. They have good melee defense. They have decent armor, health, and morale. And they even have frenzied charge, which can, it's not great, but it can be useful in certain situations. So the Boii are going to be very strong because of three main things: Oathsworn, Sword Followers, and Heavy Horse. The combination of those three with some MLG Freeman. Sorry, I had to throw that out there as a nod to Maximus. I love his MLG Freeman stuff. It cracks me up. Oh man, who would ever thought that Levy Freeman would have become such an important unit in Rome 2. So anyway, the Boii are a power faction, absolutely, unless the rules limit the number of swords. If the rules limit the number of swords to a certain level, then the Boii won't be such a power faction, but they are still a very good faction. So let me show you a battle in which I use the Boii. It should be right here. I'm going to play against Macedon, which some of you are going to be like, this isn't going to show the Boii. Macedon is not a match for Boii, and I'm going to show you just why the Boii are so dangerous. My opponent gets very outpicked here, very outpicked. And I even picked a kind of weak Boii army. So I only have one Oathsworn, and I brought 6 skirmishers. And I did this to try and be nice. And again, Eric could be like, I could beat you with Macedon. Some of you could. I'm not the best player. I admit this. But the Boii are just so much better than Macedon because of so many reasons that it is really a lopsided fight if you want to take Macedon against Boii. And then my opponent really chose the wrong units. And so, to me, it's not going to be necessarily a big showing of how skillful I am in this. What it's going to do, though, is show you why the Boii can be so dangerous to these factions or to someone who doesn't make the right picks. Let's take a look at my opponent's Macedonian army. You saw it on the screen. 2 Aspis Companion Cav. Now, many patches ago, these guys would have been fairly dangerous to sword infantry. They are no longer that dangerous to sword infantry unless they're coming in on a rear charge, but there's cheaper cavalry like Thessalians that can pretty much do the same thing. The problem with Aspis Cav isn't that their stats are bad. It's that they have a hard time struggling through a unit like Heavy Horse. That would be a very bad fight for Aspis Cav to be in. Their price is just kind of forbidding. If the price on these units got lowered, it would make them a more threatening unit for the battlefield, and part of me would like to see that considered on, say, like Mercenary Campanians and Aspis Cav. It might be interesting to see them get their price lowered a little bit. Or just to see maybe certain cavalry units with swords that gain back that bonus versus infantry. Just to see how that plays into the game. Maybe it'd be a bad choice, maybe it'd be a good choice. I don't really know. I'd just be curious to see. So he's got 3 Cretan archers. I strayed a little too far forward with my heavy horse here. That was a mistake. He's going to unload some arrows in my direction. And it is going to do a lot of damage to my men. Fortunately, I don't get anybody that died. But I'm going to start kind of splitting up and moving around my opponent. He has so few troops because he's chosen, just troops that I don't think are going to help him. He's got pikemen here and pikemen here, and then his general is a Royal Peltist. Now, the Royal Peltist is not a bad pick, but he's also put 2 chevrons on these guys, which is going to give them a lot more attack, but it's not cost effective to chevron these units in Rome 2. In Rome 1, it may have been a good idea, but just as a tip, don't do that in Rome 2. Now over here, he's got 2 Agrionians with 3 Thorax Swords. Thorax Swords are going to be so horribly and summarily destroyed by almost any sword unit in the Boii arsenal, we'll call it, that it's really... I mean, I understand why he brings them. They're a decent backbone infantry unit, but they are going to get mauled by Boii swords. He's got a couple of Thurio spears protecting his archers. This is a good choice. But watch here. I think this is one of the reasons why Maximus calls these guys MLG Freemen. He's throwing javelins at my Levy Freemen. It's a waste. His Thurio spears really need to use those on my heavy horse. And then watch. I can run up and just hurl javelins into the Cretan archers. My Levy Freeman just killed 10 Cretan archers. And then I just killed over 10 more. And then I'm going to throw another volley. So I've killed almost 30 Cretan archer. Be like, well, Heir, they're slaughtering your Levy Freeman. Yeah, they are. Who gives a crap? This one Cretan archer cost, well, I put some upgrades because I just had leftover money, but normally the Cretan archers would cost the same as all 3 of these Levy Freemen put together. So it's absolutely worth it to me. Look at this, down to 55 Cretan archers, and they've been spending ammo on me, and the Thurio spears have hurled all their javelins. So now my Celtic skirmishers, who have a better missile block chance, can move up and also cause damage to his Cretan archers. So, this is just not a good engagement for Macedon. He's losing a very expensive missile unit, and he's not gaining a whole lot because of it. And because he's having to focus on these cheap units, I'm able to bring in my Celtic bowmen, which would have otherwise been slaughtered instantly by his Cretan archers. And now I can actually start effectively using my Celtic bowmen to mow down Cretan archers. So this is just really not a good engagement. My opponent brings his Thorax swords up, and again, just watch the power of the Boii here. Yeah, just watch the numbers drop. Not a single sword follower down yet. Over 20 Thorax swords dead because they got a good charge. 30 dead. Not a single sword follower. Let's see if 40 and we can get 1 kill for the Thorax swords. Yeah, they finally got 1 kill after 35 losses. That's how badly outmatched Thorax swords are now. Don't get me wrong. I wish the game would be rebalanced just a little bit to where units like Thorax swords serve more purpose. They're a formation attack sword. The Boii are a non-formation attack, so you would hope that there's ways that it could be balanced a little better, but for now, for the sake of understanding this game, the sword followers are very good. Look, here I even charged this pikeman, just head on with sword followers, and they're still winning this fight. Now, they're going to get hit by this Royal Peltist, so I'm going to show you one of the weaknesses of the Royal Peltist, and its missiles. They have a decent missile block chance, but their armor is okay. But their missile block chance isn't as good, it doesn't seem like, as some units. It seems like they fall pretty easily to arrows. And when his guys go over here and attack my sword followers, they will kill them. But his Royal Peltist is going to open up its rear to being shot by my archers. So again, Celtic bowmen, very cheap units, now causing some very important damage. My heavy horse is able to bring a charge in to the back of his pikemen. Heavy horse is very good at this. And then I can just throw my sword followers into shield wall to make them last a little longer, hopefully. Yep, so see, their melee defense goes up. And all the while I can reposition my archers just to mow down his Royal Peltist. Over here, his Aspis Companion Cav just get mobbed by an Oathsworn and Heavy Horse. And that's why these guys aren't going to be worth it. they can just get slowed down too easy by cheaper units, and that's why you don't want to bring them. It's very hard to use them right. So yeah, look at his Royal Peltas. They're going to pull away from this engagement, and they are just getting slaughtered by Celtic Bowmen. Watch all this arrow fire coming in. It is even hitting them in the shielded flank, and they're still getting slaughtered. Royal Peltas are a decent unit, but up against Barbarian Infantry, it's going to be hard for them to excel, and they are pretty weak to missiles. So yeah, anyway, you can see that the Boii here, again, not even a particularly strong Boii army, is just going to absolutely lay waste to Macedon here. Now, a better Macedon pick may be a little more challenging for the Boii to take down, but still it is not a fair fight for Macedon right now to take on Boii. So, anyway, they are a power faction. I hope this video kind of demonstrates, sorry, I accidentally bumped the microphone there. I hope it kind of demonstrates why they're a power faction. They just have good units, and it's hard for factions like Macedon, who lack some of those good units, to match them. It's not to say that it can't be done. Quick battle is just quick battle. You're not going to come up against an MLG player every time. You know, but again, with the wrong pick here, it can leave you just in terrible shape to take on this army. I feel bad for bringing the Boii against Macedon, honestly, unless I was playing against a player who outskills me, in which I would probably need the handicap. But yeah, I mean, the Boii are really good. They're a faction that if you're a beginner and you're looking for a solid faction, they are quite good. Now, what are some different builds maybe that you could use with them? So let's say, for instance, that you're going to go against Rome. Rome's a strong faction, but not the strongest out there right now, and it's because of factions like the Boii. So, like, for instance, if you want to beat Rome, it's not a bad idea to usually tank up on some Oathsworn. Maybe get like 3 of these guys. And why? Because even Avocati cohorts struggle to beat Oathsworn when they get a decent charge, and sometimes even when they don't get a decent charge, Oathsworn can wreck it. Throw in some Sword Followers, maybe get 5 more of these guys, and then some Celtic Warriors. Get plenty of Celtic Warriors, and then you can throw some Heavy Horse in here. Maybe adjust this even a little bit. Get another Heavy Horse there, and then a couple of Levy Freemen. So check it out. An army like that, that's tough for Rome to beat. The Heavy Horse can interrupt almost everything. You've got 7 outstanding sword units, 4 more to back them up from that standpoint, 4 excellent cavalry units. I mean, and you got Levy Freemen to support them as well. So I mean, and Levy Freemen can throw javelins into the back of any infantry. They can be used to absorb missiles. They can be used against elephants. I mean, just having these guys here is enough to ward off elephants, honestly. You could throw out this Oathsworn if you want, bring another Sword Follower, and then you'd have funds left for bows if you needed to deal with elephants that way. I mean, there's so many options for the Boii. You can go straight up sword spam, so like maybe just bring 2 Heavy Horse. Let's see, you could throw in that 3rd Oathsworn. Some people will even throw in a 4th Oathsworn and really sword spam it away here. You could do so by maybe bringing more Celtic Warriors, and then again Levy Freemen. So you can still get quite a few numbers of troops out there. So look at this, 4 Oathsworn, 3 Sword Followers, 5 Celtic Warriors. I mean, that is a lot of stuff for someone to try and deal with. So it kind of just depends on whether you want to be a little more heavy on infantry or a little more mobile with cav. If you're on a map where there's a lot of forest and it may be hard to get the charges with your cav, maybe you want to go a little bit infantry heavier. If you're on a map where you feel like your cavalry has lots of good charging or against a faction that may have skirmishers, then you might want to bring more of the cavalry to deal with that. So again, Boii, an excellent faction. They should be able to hang with pretty much anybody in the game. So I don't really think there's a whole lot of factions out there that just straight up best the Boii when it comes to their roster. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this information. The Boii, obviously one of the powerhouses. I will be back soon with more faction focus.